Hi, this is Jason Rohrer, and this is the fourth tutorial video for the controller interface of Sleep is Death. This video shows basic usage of the object editor. Starting where we left off last time, we have this farm pond scene where the player can walk up here on the surface of the ground and also jump down below the surface of the water to swim around down here. Of course, once they're down here, they don't really look like they're swimming. They still look like they're standing. To change that, let's use the object editor. We can click this button right here to edit the selected object in the scene directly. Once we're in the object editor, we see a more close-up view of the object. In fact, we can zoom in even closer if we want, or zoom all the way out to screen resolution. Let's keep it at a medium resolution like that. Over here on the side, we have the object picker, where we can search for other objects to edit while we're in here. And down here, we have the sprite picker. Every object is composed of multiple sprite layers. Each sprite is only 16 by 16 pixels. So we have the head sprite selected right here. We can see that there's a little bit of a blinking border around it. Let's open up the sprite editor and look what that looks like. So again, 16 by 16 pixels, just like tiles. Let's close that down again. So by using this little control down here, we can switch between the various sprite layers. So we can see that this object is composed of 3 different sprite layers: the legs, the torso, and the head. Once the layer is selected, we can click with the mouse to move that layer around. So we can move these layers like this. Let's undo that though, back to where we were. We can also click on a layer directly and just simply drag it around in the scene. Let's undo that. So we want this farmer to look like he's swimming, not like he's standing vertically. So we need to tilt him over onto his side. Let's pick this layer, the shirt layer, and use the rotate tool to rotate that layer. Pick his pants, rotate those as well, and get those kind of centered here around his anchor so that he can still move properly. Now for his head, we might want to rotate that as well, but I think it actually looks okay and looks more like he's swimming if his head is tilted up like this a little bit. Okay, so if we want to see what this object actually looks like in the scene, we can turn off the grid display and we can zoom in a little bit more to do some final tweaking at the pixel level here. Get his head in just the right spot. Let's make his legs a little bit higher like that. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Let's call this, let's turn the grid back on, zoom out again, and call this Farmer SWI for swimming. Okay, so now if we close the object editor, we have replaced this object in the scene with the farmer who's swimming around. Now let's test this. So from the player's point of view, now that we've jumped in and we started swimming, we can swim around. We can't get up near the surface, which is a little frustrating because we should be able to swim up there. It doesn't make sense for us to stand up there. But also, we can swim along the surface of the ground up here, which is certainly not right. So let's cancel the practice mode. Let's open up that room editor again. Let's make a new version of this room where we don't let them walk up on the ground, and we allow them to swim near the surface. Close the room editor. Okay, so now let's test the scene one more time. Okay, so from the player's point of view now, we can swim all the way up near the surface. We can't jump out and walk around on the ground. And then if we actually wanted to get out and walk again, we could use the verb and type get out. Okay, so that's the move that they would send back to us in that case. Okay, so that's all looking good. So this is a good underwater scene where we have a version of the farmer who's swimming. Actually, he doesn't really look quite like he's swimming. He's kind of still very stiff looking. So let's open up that object editor again. Let's actually edit some of these sprite layers and add a new sprite layer to make him look a little bit more like he's swimming. So first of all, let's click on his shirt layer because we're going to change the way his arms look so his arms stick out a little bit more. So we could edit that shirt layer directly and change it. But if we open up the object editor, we'll see there's not really enough room here to make his arm stick out like we'd want it to. So that means, and besides, we might want that arm to move around and not be just anchored to his shirt permanently. So that means we need to create a new sprite. So let's open up the sprite here directly. So we start creating a new one instead of replacing that old one. Let's pick let's switch to erase mode and pick the line tool so we can start erasing parts of his body and just leave his arm behind. Now that we've got that disconnected, we can just use the bucket fill tool to fill in the rest with erased areas. Let's trim his arm down a little bit, and now let's rotate it so that it's sticking out like he's swimming. And we'll call this sprite, this is a new sprite here, and we'll call it Farmer Arm. So let's add it to the database, close the sprite editor, and there's 2 ways we can add this sprite to the scene. We have it selected in the sprite picker now. We can click the add button, and there it got added right to the middle of our object, and then we could drag it around. The other thing we can do is use drag and drop. So we can just click a sprite from the sprite picker and drop it into the scene exactly where we want it. Okay, so now we have this arm sticking out, but notice that he now has 3 arms because the old shirt layer still has an arm attached to it. Let's edit this layer directly to replace it once we're done. And picking the erase tool again, let's erase some lines here. Okay, so now we've got a torso without an arm, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so this is looking much better. Let's turn off the grid so we can actually see a very detailed view of how he looks. So his arm is sticking out. That's looking pretty good. Probably right about there. Looks perfect. Okay, so this is a view of the farmer swimming now with his arm out. So let's close this editor. And so now we have this version with his arm sticking out. There's one more thing that we forgot to do, and that's reposition his speech bubble because we've changed the way he looks. So let's put a speech bubble coming out of his head again. Okay, so this scene is looking pretty good. Let's call this scene underwater, and let's save it. So if we switch to our stack mode now, we have 2 scenes, one where farmer's up on the land and another one where he's swimming underwater. And so once the player has decided to jump down into the water, like this, we can switch to this scene and move them into a good position, and then they're ready to swim around. So let's test this. So they're swimming around, and if they speak, their speech is in a good spot. Okay, so that looks good. Now let's say that they have spent too much time underwater, and they're just staying down there for several turns in a row, and they obviously can't breathe underwater. Let's say they're sending this move back to us, and they keep sending it back to us. So let's make it look like they're starting to drown. Let's edit the selected object, click on the head, and now edit that selected sprite layer there. Now we've got this head. Let's pick the skin color. Open up the color picker. Let's make it a little bit bluer. Let's fill in the skin color here. So they're starting to look like they're turning blue. If we close this, it'll automatically replace. Then close this, it'll automatically replace them in the scene with this new object with the version of them drowning. So we send this move back. It's pretty obvious that they're starting to turn blue under the water. But let's say they stay under here and decide that they're not going to get out. They're just going to keep staying under here. So they send this move back to us. Now we say, wow, they've been under there way too long. We need to make them look like they're dead. So coming in here to the object editor again, we can drag their layers around, kind of make them, let's rotate the head to make them look like they're dead. And let's edit that head layer to make it look like their eyes are closed. So close this. Now the head layer is edited. Now they're laying there flat. Let's move them down onto the ground under the pond and freeze their position. Okay, so now we're ready. Our move will be sent across, and there they are, frozen on the bottom of the pond. They can't use their move tool anymore. They can still act, and they can still speak. They might say, "Oh, I'm dead." Okay, so that shows usage of the object editor both ahead of time to prepare things and in real time when dealing with something that the player does that you weren't expecting them to do. Maybe you weren't expecting them to spend so much time underwater. So that's basic usage of the object editor. Thank you.